Hey everyone, this is Tim Chavez from Faith Matters. Before we introduce our guests for today, we want to give you a disclaimer that this episode mentions suicide in connection to LGBTQ youth. If you are not in a place to listen right now, you might want to skip this one. If you are though, we really encourage you to listen in on this tough but important topic that impacts so many in our community. In this conversation, Dr. Jordon and Liz Sharp from St. George, Utah, shared their remarkable and inspiring story of moving from trauma, confusion, and loss to miracles, enlightenment, and strength as an LDS LGBTQ family. Several years ago, even before they had thought much about this themselves, a tragic event with some family friends resulted in Liz and Jordon receiving strong promptings that God has a deep and abiding love for LGBTQ individuals and wants them to thrive. Jordon, who is Vice President of Marketing and Communication at Utah Tech University, and Liz, who is a registered nurse, eloquently described the mistakes made, lessons learned, opportunities found, and how their family bonds expanded far beyond their expectations after their son Sam came out at the age of 14. Due to what he saw as a lack of resources and support in this space, Jordon eventually helped found the Gather Conference, the largest ever Christ-centered conference for Latter-day Saint LGBTQ individuals and those who love them. To learn more about the Gather Conference and to find resources for LGBTQ LDS families, you can visit liftandlove.org. Liz and Jordon's family story is near and dear to our hearts at Faith Matters. So often, we don't have the answers to know how we all belong in the family of God. We only have our conviction that we do belong and a willingness to figure it out along the way. Our conversation with Liz and Jordon gets deep into their personal story, including their ongoing spiritual learning and efforts to build conversations around the LGBTQ experience in the church. We found them to be incredible examples of how to plow into uncharted territory with humility and a simple trust in one fact, that we are all beloved children of God. And with that, we'll jump right into the conversation.
We have been married for 23 years. We have 5 kids. I'm a hospice nurse, and Jordon is the Vice President of Marketing at Utah Tech University. I guess we could say that throughout our life so far, we have felt that we've had our life figured out. The gospel has always been centered to us, and I can say for both of us, I think that we feel that we kind of checked all of the boxes, I guess you could say. So when our son Sam came out as gay at age 15, this changed a little bit of the path that we thought we were on. And we began a beautiful and amazing journey of learning so many things that we could not have learned any other way.
I'm curious if, as you've gone on this journey and had these experiences, if you felt like, looking back, if anything prepared you for this experience of having a gay child.
Quite a few things. This is a personal story, and I'll heads up, it does involve suicide for kind of your listeners. So I was a bishop. I was going to school full time. Liz was going to school full time. I was working, teaching classes to pay for the school. I was also doing my doctorate dissertation at the same time. And Liz was working part-time, and she was about to have our 4th child. And we got called as a bishop, and we were like, I remember doing the math on paper going, Liz, this isn't actually even possible. But we were just super busy. But at that time, because I was so young and we were so busy, I think the Lord took pity on me, and he would just like talk directly to me. And it was really, really cool. I'd never had that happen so much. So one day I had to go to Enterprise, which is just north of St. George where we live. I had to mail some things to Enterprise. And, I had this strongest impression, drive this to Enterprise, just drive it up. I'm thinking, I can't drive to Enterprise. It's like 45 minutes away. It was the middle of the day. I was like, no. And I got it again. I got it so strong. I was like, you know what? I'm just going to drive to Enterprise and drop this off to the mayor up there. I don't know why. And I called Liz, and out of the blue, I just said, hey, I got to drive to Enterprise. Is there any way you could get a babysitter and just join me? And I thought there was no way. She's like, yeah, I can. So totally random, never happened before. In the middle of the working day, I pick up she meets me. We drive to Enterprise. If you've never done it, St. George is all desert and red rock, and you drive north, it goes up, and you land in this mountain little town. So it's really, really cool. So we dropped off the things to the city, and as we were leaving, there was just a big sign, and they're known for this big farm up there that has raspberries, and it said, raspberries for sale. So we stopped. And it's this, we drive through this path. There's this beautiful house up there, and we meet the farmers. And there's this cute little old couple that they retired, and they're raspberry farmers now. And I just want to buy a flat, and the farmer says, you know, you can pick your own raspberries if you'd like. And Liz is like, yeah, we'll pick raspberries. So they hand me this basket, and we're just picking raspberries. Well, let me pause for a minute. There was a family that we used to live by called the Mitchells, and we had the backyard, basically shared a backyard. Our backyards were so small, and one day it was Fast Sunday, and I was eating cereal, and I got a call from the Mitchells, and they said, it's Fast Sunday. I'm like, our backyards are way too small. So we knew the Mitchells. We knew the Mitchells really good. And we moved, and then they didn't even know where we moved, and they had moved in again across the street. So we had known the Mitchells for a long time. Well, we come to find out that this is the Mitchells' grandparents that own this farm. We're like, oh. So we start talking about the Mitchells, but the conversation quickly turns to their granddaughter, whose name is Jordon. And Jordon is a wonderful young lady. She is a total live wire. She always has been. I love her. We love her to death. She's just wild, and in a good way, in a fun way. And so anyway, we start talking about Jordon in depth. And she's about 13.
Yeah, 13 or 14.
Anyway, so we meet Jordon's grandparents, and we're talking to them, and we're picking raspberries in the middle of the day. And then we leave. We got home like 4:30, something like that. We had not been home 5 minutes when our daughter and the Mitchell's other daughter, Jocelyn, came running through the door and said, you've got to come. Jordon is really, really hurt.
Yeah, we were
take it from there.
We were kind of walking in from being on our day trip together, and my little girl walked in and said, Mom, Jordon is really hurt. And I was a nurse. I was getting an advanced degree in nursing, and I was in school, but I had been a registered nurse for a few years, and I was thinking, well, what happened? And she said, there's blood all over, and I think she fell off her skateboard because she's laying by her skateboard. And I'm like, okay, I'll get my nursing bag and I'll bring my bandage stuff over. And so we kind of start walking, and she goes, Mom, no, she's really, really hurt, and there's a gun on the ground. And so at that point, I kind of started running across, and our front doors faced each other. So I just ran in the front door barefoot, and they pointed to the garage. She's in the garage, Mom. And I opened the door to a very dire scene. And little Jordon was laying on the ground in the garage. And initially I had thought I was going to go help her because she fell off her skateboard. And what I found was someone laying on the ground who had just put a gun under her chin. And so I quickly knelt down by her and was feeling for her pulse, and I didn't feel her pulse. And because she had so much in her mouth, I turned her into the recovery position on the side and wiped everything out and kept feeling for her pulse and trying to stimulate her. And she just wasn't responding. In the meantime, we're calling 911 and gathering the kids. And then I started to feel a pulse, and the paramedics got there really, really quickly, and they did a couple compressions on her, and she opened her eyes for a second, but they were able to load her up. And because Jordan's parents weren't home, my husband was their bishop at the time. He said, I'm going to wait for her mom and drive her mom to the hospital so she didn't have to drive herself. And the police made all of us leave the home because they had to do a little investigation. So I took all of their kids and my kids back to my house. And I just am thinking, oh my gosh, there's going to be so much trauma. These kids are going to think about this their whole life. And so I just said, we're going to kneel down and pray, you guys. So we just went in my living room, and we all knelt down, and I said a prayer. I just asked for peace. I just asked for the medical professionals to do what they needed to do so that this little girl would live. And I was extremely worried about my daughter and the other little girls that were there that saw what they saw and the trauma that they might have regarding that. But as soon as we said amen and I opened my eyes from that prayer, I had the strongest, most distinct thought or impression that said, if this has anything to do with the church, we need to fix this. I had never had a thought like that in my life. I had no idea why little Jordon had come and tried to end her life. I had no idea. I just wanted her to live. I wanted us to feel peace. And that was my first impression.
So just quickly to kind of bring this full circle. So Liz has that experience at her house. I go to the hospital with, and Jordan's family is all starting to arrive. The parents arrive, siblings are arriving, and these grandparents who we were just at their home arrive. And we had a small window where she was in the ER. They were moving her to surgery. Things were not looking good. And it's just chaos and it's sadness. And they said, if you want to give a blessing, now's your time. You've got to do it right now before we go to surgery. So I turned to her dad and I say, Brother Mitchell, would you like to give Jordon a blessing? He says, Bishop, I just can't do it right now. Would you mind? So I go in, and Jordon is, they've just, all the things in her, all the cords and everything. And so I'm already a little nervous, but I start giving this blessing. And again, I didn't know at the time that this was a closeted youth. I didn't know. I didn't know the shame that she was carrying. I wished I had, but I didn't. And I'm giving this blessing. And as clear as any message I'd ever received, there were two very specific things that came to me. The first one was, Jordan's going to live. Tell them. And I'm thinking, if you had seen the scene, I didn't even want to say that. I didn't want to give false hope. I said, Jordon, you will make a full recovery. You'll make a full recovery. And the second piece was, Jordon, you are made exactly as you were intended to be made. And there should be no effort to try to change who you are. And you will live and you will thrive and you will be. And these are the words. And I'm starting to make sense of all of this. And as I walk out and I'm meeting the family there, and I think the parents are starting to make sense of this. And what was great for us is it not only prepped me and my wife for when our son was to come out just a few years later, this very strong impression, but I also saw a loving Heavenly Father just putting amazing things in place, taking that day, taking a young bishop away from his work, allowing him to be with his wife, to prepare for a terrible night, meeting family members who would be a part of this story, part of the process, part of the support, sharing a moment with them, coming back, being home early from work, having a nurse on the scene, having a bishop on the scene, all of the pieces in place. And it was just such a testimony to us. It was a life-changing experience. And for us personally, prepped us for when our son would come out to us.
And we should probably add that Jordon recovered and she's doing well today. And we just had her in our home, a little while ago. So we're so grateful for that, and so grateful we've been able to talk to her about the things she was feeling before that experience. And it's helped us a lot, but she's doing well, thankfully.
Thank you for sharing that. It's incredibly moving and tragic and powerful.
Yeah. I want to give you a chance to talk about your most personal experience with your own family when Sam comes out. But before we move to that, I would just be really curious if there were things that, reflecting back to who you were before all of this happened, when maybe you just hadn't. I think sometimes you have to be sort of invited in some ways, like invited by your life into the LGBTQ conversation. And I think it's really normal that maybe you don't really feel conflicted by until somebody that you really love is in the middle of something hard. And then all of a sudden you have new eyes and you see a lot more pain. But as you reflect back to that time of your life before you kind of had this invitation to really start thinking about these issues, were there things that maybe like kept your heart feeling settled in these LGBTQ spaces that you are challenging now? Like, were there ways that you were thinking about the plight of LGBTQ people in the church that you feel differently about now that you've had this experience with Jordon and with Sam?
I have, absolutely. There's one thing that I will admit that was very naive and I did not realize. I just always assumed our church loved everyone, and we do. And I always assumed, I mean, gay people were always welcome in my life, but I assumed that if you were gay, you didn't want to be a part of the church. Like, you wouldn't want to be there. But the challenge now is, why would I feel that way? Like, I want them, I want my kids with me in the pews. And now I'm realizing that they want to be there. And a lot of times, well, with our own experience, I can only speak for myself and maybe some people that have shared with us, but they want to be there and oftentimes just feel too ashamed or not welcome or that they don't belong. And I did not fully realize that until now.
Well, I think too,
Thanks, Liz.
it's important, and me and Liz talk about this a lot. She might talk about it more later, but you know, one of the problems is all of our kind of policies and rhetoric and beliefs, many of them are in the world, are based on the idea that this was a choice. And when it's a choice, it's easier to think, well, don't do that then. Just stop doing that and you can have all these blessings and all these things. And that really was the thought. Well, then science comes along and more experience and time and hearing these experiences and these stories and learning them. And then that doesn't fit anymore. But I think a lot of our beliefs are still based on that false premise. If you've got a false premise, you know you're not going to get a good outcome. So I think for me, that's a lot what it was. And it is kind of sad that it took a personal, very dramatic experience to start to rethink. That's a sad thing that I have to admit. But it's also nice to be able to think, okay, let's relook at this in a different way.
Yeah, thank you. I'm sure a lot of people will really relate to that. Do you want to talk about Sam and that experience? So this is a few years later now, you have this new experience with your own son.
Yeah, a few years later, Sam sent us a text message and said, "Mom and Dad, I'm wondering if you already know or if you've already guessed, but I'm gay. And I'm really embarrassed about it. I don't want you to talk to anyone about it. And if you have any questions, you can go to the church's website. They have information for you." And so, you know, I think that experience for us was overall positive. As I look back, I think there was definitely some things we could have done differently. If I could go back, which I can't, but I would say to myself, this is going to be a really good thing for your family. You guys are going to learn a ton. You're going to become more authentic. You're going to become more loving. And one thing I wish I would have done more, and Sam has expressed to me that was a little bit hurtful for him, is we didn't talk about it very much. And that came probably just from, I was really afraid to say the wrong thing. I mean, that was my first thought, was I don't want to do any damage to his mental health. I knew we had firsthand experience with Jordan's situation of feeling so much shame. But now I realize that the antidote to shame is talking about things. And I was trying to respect his privacy and his timeline. But, you know, if people are wondering whether they should ask them and talk to them about it, yes, you should. And learn as much as you can. And it took me a minute to find the right resources. And then once I found those, everything just blossomed and I felt comfortable. And it took work. And it was through reading and listening and podcasts and prayer and counseling. And then I think once we started talking about it, things got a lot better.
I'll just add on my side, I think, Liz, I think women just naturally are better at this whole thing. Everything. Let's just say everything. But in this situation, she was just better. I was nice and positive, but I'm going to be honest, and I'm going to speak maybe directly to some of the other dads, grandpas, uncles, because a lot of time a family situation comes in and the dads are like, okay, well, let's fix it. What can we fix, right? And so kind of my stance was supportive of Sam, but I also didn't talk to him a lot about it. But I also inside, I thought, okay, I would encourage him, don't come out. You're young. You don't have to worry about this right now. These are complex situations. Let's just see what happens. Because I didn't know if, the LGBTQ is on a spectrum. Who knows? Is it confused? Is it a phase? What is it? And so let's just hold off. And then I just didn't talk about it. We just swept it under the rug, and we just lived our life. Well, one day Sam wasn't doing very good in school, and I pulled up his grades, and that was rare for him. So I remember I called him into the family room, and I just said to him, Sam, I was actually being quite strong. I was mad. I was like, Sam, tell me about your grades, and this isn't like you, and you're a smart kid, and all the things. And Sam does not like to disappoint, so that is not a good thing to do with Sam ever. But Sam sat on our couch in our family room, and he put his head down, and I just said, what is going on? Sam doesn't open up a lot, and all of a sudden, Sam told me all the feelings of his heart. He told me about how he felt from a young age, feeling different, and the confusion that came, the cognitive dissonance that came, the things he was hearing at the church, the shame, how am I going to go on a mission? How am I eternally damned? Am I going to be part of our eternal family? Am I going to be cut out? And just saying all of these things. And I just listened for a long time, and I was taught by this young man. And in that time, had to happen to me twice because I'm kind of got a thick head. And Heavenly Father once again came in, and it's almost just like he put his arm around me. And I'll never forget the words, because he said, this is my son. And I remember specifically, this is my son. And he said, this is him. This is him. This is who he is. He's awesome. He's special. And I just realized any attempt to just change him was going to cause frustration, was going to cause pain. And to my soul, it was like I had a cleansing of just what the experience was, what was happening, and to just roll with it. And it was the most remarkable experience. Around this same time at my work, was doing a leadership training, and we brought in this person, and it was literally within a week or two. And she shared this quote that I've shared before, but I'd like to share it because it really sums up kind of my experience. And it's by Wes Angelosi, and it says, go and love someone exactly as they are, and then watch how quickly they transform into the greatest, truest version of themselves. When one feels seen and appreciated in their own essence, one is instantly empowered. And from that moment, I just embraced our new life. And I saw Sam, just like that quote said, I saw him become a better version of himself. I saw him come back. I saw the smiles come back and the laughter. And I just saw my boy return. And he's about to graduate. He's a senior. He's been in student government this year. He's getting 4.0. He got a scholarship. He's going to college. And I just can tell you, had we just tried to suppress him, it would have been a different outcome. And so I'm grateful for, once again, that knowledge. I think you should bring on someone that studies this, because I've been looking into this. So there's some research called intellectual humility. This experience has taught our family intellectual humility. And what that says is it means that that a person recognizes a gap in their knowledge. We felt like we had things worked out. We had been taught from a young age how to live and what to do. And all of a sudden, this experience didn't fit into our knowledge. And we could have fought against that forever. But also, this intellectual humility tells us, when two people don't agree on something, 82% of the time, everyone feels like they're right, or 82% of the time. Well, do the math on that. That doesn't work. And so if we're always right and that person's always right, we are going to miss out on some great experiences. The Sharp family had to learn intellectual humility in a great fashion, and we're grateful for it. And I was taught that by a 15-year-old boy in my family room and with Heavenly Father, and I'm grateful.
Yeah. Thank you. I think this is an increasingly common phenomenon in the church for parents to have children who are coming out in some way. And I think
Right.
there's a perception that doesn't need to necessarily be a difficult experience, that, you can fully support and love your child. You can still fully support and love the church and embrace it. But I think it's also true that many who are actually in that situation struggle to do that, and it's hard for them. Why do you guys think that is?
I think most members of the church, just like we said, we were in the same boat. We've had the opportunity to learn and do things a little bit differently, but I think we're well intended with the things that we say. Family is central. We obviously believe in that, but we also have to recognize that more than 50% of the church is a non-nuclear family. So sometimes things are said in talks or in lessons or whatever, and they maybe feel like an othering. So, I've had experiences where my gay son is playing the organ or playing the piano in a different room, and then maybe something a little bit harmful was said about gay people. And so for me, that it was just hard because I'm sitting there going, well, that's not true. You're talking about someone that's in your ward family. And all of that, again, was based on a false premise that this is something that people chose to be deviant, or it was something bad. They wanted to rebel, but that's just not the case. These are people that want to be here with us. They want to worship with us. They want to find Christ with us. And so you kind of just think some talks that are really uplifting and good for some families can be really painful for other families. But one thing that would happen sometimes is when we would tell people about Sam, they would act very sad. And that sent a signal to me that something was wrong with Sam, or that this was, something that needed to change. And for me, I was not sad that Sam was gay, but I was sad that they were sad that Sam was gay. And that was a little bit hard. This wasn't something that he needed to change. This is just who he was. This is just how Heavenly Father sent him to me. And as his parents, we know that there's purpose in that, and we know that he has a lot of potential just the way he is.
I think this perception that there's a choice and you can and so you're choosing this, so there are consequences. Like, I feel like that's becoming less common. I don't hear that floating around as often as I did growing up. But I think maybe another face that idea wears is this idea that you'll be fixed, quote unquote, fixed in the next life. And so if you can just endure to the end in the way that everyone has to endure whatever trial they have, then you'll be relieved of this burden in heaven. So I feel like that is around and heavy, like that idea. And that seems a little bit more common. Can you just talk about how you see that playing out with Sam or in your family? Like why does that hurt to imagine that that's how this will be resolved for your family?
That's such a good question, because that is extremely common. And like I said, this is our own experience. This is my own belief. And I feel strongly that Heavenly Father gave me my kids to be their mother and to do the best by them that I know how and feel is best for them. When you tell someone that they will be fixed or they will overcome something in the next life, they go, well, what's the point of being in this life then? Heavenly Father made his children diverse, and we don't have all the answers, but I do know that my son came here this way, and I know that there is eternal purpose in the way he is, and I don't want him to change. I'm so grateful to have a gay son, and I'm grateful for all that brings to our family and to my kids and their perception of the way the world works.
And I just add two things I learned to answer your question, because like you said, it's really common. First of all, we got to realize when someone says, "Oh, you'll be fixed," we're basically looking at someone and saying, "You're broken. You are messed up. There's just nothing we can do here." It's like when the mechanic says, "Sorry, this car is just turn it in. It's done." And think of the damage that does to a human being and their soul. So we got to be careful going around telling people you're broken. And so I'm really grateful you brought that up. And to answer your question, Tim, where you're just like, yeah, why can't you just go to church and, okay, you have a gay child, so what? Like, love them and love the church and just love it all. And we do try to do that, by the way. I mean, it's not like that's bad advice. I was with a running group and we're pretty close. We were running and we had some friends that had been struggling with the church because they had a gay son who came out. We hadn't been telling very many people that we had. He didn't want us to tell people yet. So we're still kind of as a family in the closet. I'm running with this group and they're talking about this, our friends that don't go to church, and he was a bishop and they can't believe they don't go to church and how could they do this? We were at a park. I stopped running and everybody stopped with me. And there was about 6 or 7 of us. And I said, do you really want to know why they're struggling with the church? And we all just stopped. And I said, can I just give you a little analogy of what this is like for our families, particularly the ones that their children are coming out at a young age? I said, I want everyone in this circle to imagine that you're a part of this wonderful club. And this club, being a member of this club, has gone back generations. This club is everything to your family. It is your social connection. It is your spiritual connection. It is your rites of passage. It is your weddings. It's your birthdays. You do it all there. You pay heavy dues to be a part of the club. It's your entire life. I said, I want you to imagine one day you come to the club. You've got all your children dressed up, ready to go in the club. You're excited to be there. There's a sign on the door that you notice. And I said, pick anything that you can't control. I'm going to use, for lack of a better example, green eyes. And the sign says, if you have green eyes, you're welcome to come in the lobby, but you're not welcome at the pool. You're not welcome at the buffet. You can't take part in all of the big events. I said, I want you to imagine you're standing in the lobby with your children. They're ready to go in. You look into their eyes. You realize 1, 2, 3 of them, whatever it is, have green eyes. I said, you have 3 choices as a parent. You can send your children away and go in the club like you always have. And that's sadly pretty common. Number 2, you stay in the lobby with them and you try to connect them. As people come in and out, you say hello. You try to introduce them to your green-eyed children. You try to tell them how great they are. You go into the buffet, maybe you get some food and you bring it back. Or you turn around, you go get in your car and you never return because you just aren't welcome anymore. I know that seems strong. That is the plight of the LDS LGBTQ family. I can tell you the Sharp family, we are squarely in the lobby. That's why we're here today, trying to share, trying to break bread with anyone who will do it with us. And I can also share, I do want to say the church and the world is trying to understand this better, along with all of us. We have actually had the opportunity to meet with high-up church leaders about this. They requested to meet with us. One of the 12 apostles spent 3 hours with me and Liz talking through these. What can we do? They do love us all. They are worried about this, and we are grateful for that. But keep in mind, if someone is in the lobby, maybe why they're there, and try to make them feel a little bit more comfortable.
Thank you so much, Jordon. I get that metaphor. And I think we're just barely getting to the age where we can imagine, being on the parent side of that metaphor. And it's a whole different ballgame to imagine leaving one child, maybe a child who cares the most, out in a lobby. So thank you. I am hearing though the voice of a critic in my head, and I want you to address this because I know that you've thought about it. What do you say to someone who says, no, 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 they're welcome. They're welcome in the club. Like these are the rules, but if they choose to live a celestial law, then they're welcome.
It's easy to say that, but when you understand that the core of the gospel is family and connection, and to then say you have to give up family and connection to be here, that's something that's not asked of us. So we're asking people something that's not being asked of us. Most of the rules in the church impact someone else, and they're for everyone. Stealing, none of us steal, and if you do it, it impacts someone else. Murder, the list goes on and on. This is the only thing I can actually think of that we ask someone to do something that we're not doing and that doesn't impact them.
Yeah.
And so their choices are to live alone, live a lie, or live in sin. Take door 1, 2, or 3. This is my opinion. That's not a fair thing to ask. Maybe we need to reconsider what that feels like for these individuals. However, having said that, we understand the complexity. We understand, that blessings come from keeping the commandments. This is it's a little bit of a unique situation, and we at least need to be aware of that. We shouldn't stick it in the same boxes of these other things. That's one of the very painful things that comes out of this. This conversation wouldn't have even happened almost 10 years ago, very readily. We all just lived by these kind of traditions to explain all of this.
I think too, we've talked about this as well, like in the healthcare community, like when I became a nurse, you would take an oath and you say, I will do no harm to my patients. I will use evidence-based practice. I will use best practice when caring for our patients. And I can say when Jordon and I started our family, we took that same approach. We took time to decide when we were going to have our children. When we had our children, we prayed over them. We told Heavenly Father, like, we want the best life for these children. And so when you're learning about what helps people thrive, when you know that the best way to raise a healthy child is for them to do the same things that we did through healthy natural development, is to date, to have lots of good healthy relationships, to get married, to give back to society, to be honest. And I mean, like, the value of honesty and integrity plays in here, because if you're a closeted gay person, you feel like you're lying all the time because people are like, oh, are you going to prom? And who are you going with? And it's so hard on them, on their mental health. So as we've learned as parents, and as we've instilled values into our kids of integrity and how to give back to society the best way, we are not going to do harm. And the healthiest way for Sam is to do the same things we did, to date, to get married, to be honest and have integrity, to have a family if he chooses. But when you're asking them to be closeted, you're actually taking away their agency to even choose that for themselves. And so that's where we are. We don't want to do any harm. And
I remember having this all at once with this realization that every sin I could think of, if you just walk it all the way down the line, it eventually leads to deep unhappiness. And I remember just realizing all at once that, like, I couldn't find a way to explain that these marriages that I knew of personally, that there was no end of the line where eventually those relationships resulted in some unhappiness. It was like personal growth and connection and love and all of the things that I'm experiencing in my own relationship. So I appreciate you pointing that out. And Liz, I think that puts you as parents, I know that puts you in this really, really uncomfortable position, seeing this and seeing the way these opportunities that you're recognizing for Sam to grow. And then also feeling like you're probably, it's probably feels like a lot of pressure. And so I know that's the most personal and vulnerable thing, but like, I mean, that's a moral dilemma, I guess. Like
Mhm.
you are parents first. And I know that you love the church and that you're all in and you're here showing up and being in the foyer. How do you navigate those specific situations where it feels like a zero-sum game, where a yes to one thing is a no to something else, and it means that you're going to really feel some tension?
We need to recognize that these parents are faced with, this sounds dramatic, but sometimes these are life or death situations. So we're not just talking about, our kid doesn't want to go to church or
Or they want to stay out late on a Friday night.
Yeah, they want to stay out late on a Friday night.
Yeah.
Let me share a few statistics. And again, we don't want that. We're hoping, we hope this is bringing some hope and some awareness. But the Trevor Project, which does a lot of research on these topics, and they do it state by state. We're in Utah. So they just came out with some statistics for LGBTQ youth in Utah. And I just want to share a couple of them. So 50% of LGBTQ youth last year considered suicide. 50%, 1 in 2. 75% they experience anxiety and depression. And this is what I hope this whole conversation is about. And this is not to go after parents who have struggled with this. There's no judgment. There's no judgment. We're just kind of telling our story. We've done a lot of things right. We've done a lot of things wrong. But the stat that really is hard is 41% identified their home as an LGBTQ affirming space. So meaning 60% do not find their home a safe space. Let's think about that for just a minute. When you were a kid and you had a bully at school, or you had a bad test, or you fell and broke your knee, or whatever it is, most of us, hopefully, your home was that safe space where a parent bandaged you up, loved you, and you can always go home and get recharged and go back into the world. And 60% of these LGBTQ youth do not feel that in their own home. And so, and again, we get it. There's a lot of pressure. There's traditions. There are rituals. There are all of these things that are causing. But at the end of the day, like Liz said, we gotta at least have the stance of do no harm. Let's at least start there.
I was definitely the kid that was like pretty black and white, didn't really get into trouble. Like, I was seminary council president. I wanted to serve a mission, but Jordon wouldn't let me because he wanted to get married. I mean, I love the safety that kind of guidelines and rules provide. So when you feel like maybe you're in opposition, as you said, that was a little scary for me, but I do have to give credit to my leadership. I have talked very openly with my bishop and my state president, and they are so empathetic and very active listeners, and have given me the space to be the space and the validation to be the mother and to teach them and honestly counsel them. They've been really good and active listeners and really tried to understand and love our family where we are. And that really has felt like Christ-like love to me, which is something we really need. Another thing is just simplifying the gospel, simplifying what the Savior taught is most important, is to love God and then love your neighbors as yourself. And just kind of simplifying that has taken a lot of the uneasiness or feeling of, maybe I'm not doing things the right way from the outside looking in, but I am convicted that we are doing things the best way we can. Again, I've also decided that my happiness does not depend on a certain outcome. And I had to make that decision because I also want to be actively involved and make things better and change things so more people aren't getting hurt or feeling bad. And I want my family with me every Sunday. Like, I crave for all my little kids, all my children to be on the bench by me. But it's not always a safe space for these kids. But I've had to just make the decision that my happiness is not based on whether anything changes or doesn't change. I can be happy today And it's just a choice by choice, situation by situation, and a week by week decision. So,
Yeah, thank you so much
Thank
for
you.
sharing. I've been we've been grieving the loss of Melissa Inouye this week, and she did this interview just days before she passed away. And the part that I've been thinking about so much this week is that she said that the reporter asked her something like, what feels more clear and important to you as you approach death? Like, what is there something that feels more solid about your testimony or the afterlife? And her answer was that she's like, all these, basically the technicalities of ceilings and heaven and degrees of glory and all those things, just those feel less important. But she said, what I have a rock solid testimony of is the local Mormon ward. And I know, I get what she's talking about. Like, the thing that is so real and so tangible is like that boots on the ground experience in relationship with the people we love. And I just keep hearing that through your story, that I don't know how it's all going to work out, but I know I love my son, and I know that this is what it feels like is needed right now, and that this is how love would show up. But the question probably for people is, do I do no harm in this relationship, or do I do no spiritual harm? Like, I bet sometimes that's the thing they're trying to parse out. Will I hurt them spiritually if I accept them this way? And I just really appreciate that you seem really anchored to this experiential relationship that you are having right now, like this heaven that you're creating in your family right this minute, and not not our current understanding of what will happen in, when we die. And I know that probably takes a lot of courage, and I really appreciate that you're willing to talk about that.
yeah,
So,
inviting
thank you.
peace into your life is really important. And not looking in the future and not looking in the past and living in the present has become really important to us
Wow.
too.
So I'm curious, if we zoomed out a little bit more from sort of like the parent-child relationship and just looked at the relationship that we have as, fellow members of the church, as brothers and sisters, what can we do as church members to help LGBTQ people feel more accepted in our wards and communities, especially acknowledging that there are some who are out and there are some who are not, and they may be sitting next to us in the pews without feeling like it's safe enough for them to say anything about who they are.
Yeah, exactly. Like, I think the first thing we have to do is recognize that there are LGBTQ people in your ward. They're in your family.
Yeah.
They're in your circle of friends. They are listening to either know if they are accepted or if they are rejected. I think we've pretended that they don't exist for far too long, and we've missed out on their talents, and we've missed out on the blessing of having them amongst us. And now it's even becoming an important issue for people that maybe don't even have as close of proximity as us. But just that recognition, I think, is the number one way you can change and help.
On Sunday, sometimes you have those Sundays where you're just needing, I just need spirituality. I just was like praying for a connection. It was our ward conference, and our bishop gave a beautiful talk about the Good Samaritan. And I thought, this is so perfect, I think, for what's happening in a little bit with our LGBTQ friends. And I will say, the safe space for all of us is Christ. If you have any questions, just how would he have handled things is perfect. And so this parable that he shares, we have this traveler that is coming from Jerusalem to Jericho, and we don't know the story, but he's beaten to death almost to an inch of his life. And maybe he deserved it. Maybe he was a bad person. Maybe, who knows what it was. We had the priest and the Levite come by. And back then, if it was kind of against the law religiously for priests to touch a dead body. They didn't want to touch blood. They didn't want to defile the holy man. And so what did they do? And again, for their religious belief, they went across the street to avoid this person who was unclean and who we didn't know his story. And then we hear the Samaritan who was looked so down upon. And we hear what he does. He cleans the wounds. He bandages them up. He puts him on his donkey, takes him to the inn. I think unintentionally, with this space, some of us are stepping over and we're going across the street because we're trying to protect. And we say we can't have the gay lifestyle in our life. Well, I'll tell you what, we can be in the gospel, we can make room, and we can give our permission to just love and just clean people up when needed. Doesn't matter what they did, where they've been, who they are, clean them up, get them on a better path. I'll tell you, when we were in this moment, just looking for answers and reading books and trying to find things online and scouring the internet and scouring the church website, we did find a few people that were in this space that were Christ-centered, loved the gospel, loved the church, and just valued the LGBTQ. You probably heard some of the names: Ben Shalati, Charlie Bird, Richard Osler, and Lift in Love with Allison Dayton. And I just said to Allison, this has been sacred ground to us. What can the Sharps do to help? And at that time, they said, well, we want to do a conference that is Christ-centered, that is faith-promoting, that is church-supporting, and is for LGBTQ. And it's called the Gather Conference. We had our first one last year. So well, fast forward, the night before, we were setting things up and getting all the swag together, and all the volunteers show up, and it's exciting. And they were laughing and they were joking and they were excited. Well, I kept noticing one gentleman in his early 30s. He was not talking to anyone. He seemed actually very agitated, but he was just working like a machine, working. So I decided to walk over to him, and I just said, hey, what's your name? And he told me, and he said, what got you involved with this? Who talked you into this? And he goes, I don't want to be here. His name was Spencer. He allowed me to share this. He said, I don't want to be here. He goes, I am a gay member of the church. But he goes, the thought of coming and celebrating this part of me seems like the worst thing in the world. And he goes, the only reason I'm here is I had a friend who called and said, hey, we should go to this conference. And I said, no. She lives in Arizona. She called back and goes, Spencer, I bought us 2 tickets to this conference, and I bought a plane ticket, and you have to pick me up from the airport or I'll be stuck there. So he said, but then I realized if I have to go, I'm going to volunteer. I'd rather just work. I do not want to celebrate this. This has been the most painful part of my life, and I don't want to go to a conference and be reminded of it. So I said, okay, well, thank you for your help. And he continued to work late into the night. Well, I watched Spencer throughout the conference. It kind of became a thing. Go check in with Spencer, see how Spencer's doing. And I watched this individual kind of like his heart and his soul melt in front of my eyes. Well, I want to jump to the last day. So the last day, when you walked in the Gather conference, there was a wall. There was a wall that I wanted to do that said, I'm gathering for. And people could just take a Post-it note and say why they came. And I just wanted, as a marketing guy, I just wanted to know, why did people come? And I'd go walk by and you'd see, for my son, I came for my grandkids, I came for more understanding. One of them said, I came for the younger me who wouldn't have come here. Bishops that said, I'm coming to know how to minister. Well, anyway, it was the end of the conference, and some were really difficult. I'm coming so I won't take my own life. So at the end of the conference, we were cleaning up, and I remembered the Post-it notes, and I didn't get to read them all, and I really wanted the Post-it notes. So I turned to Spencer, and I go, Spencer, I want the Post-it notes. Go get the Post-it notes. And I see him just run. And so I was doing something else, and then later I found him kind of in the corner, and I saw him from afar, and he's just kind of sacredly and carefully organizing these Post-it notes. And I went and talked to him. I said, Spencer, how's this been for you? And he said, I never knew I could find a place where I could address this part of me and still feel the love of Christ in the gospel. I didn't think it was possible. He said, this moment has changed everything for me, thinking that there's a space. And he kept kind of shaking this one Post-it note. And then he shared to me, when he came out, his family was okay, but they never really brought it up again. It was just kind of like the untalked about. And his mom ended up coming to the conference, surprised him and came. And he had this Post-it note, and he said, this Post-it note, this is my mom's handwriting. And kind of like for the first time, he realized that his mom saw him loved him completely. I mean, always knew his mom loved him, but just that all the parts of him. And that's why this space is so crucial, is so that people know they don't have to maybe choose, and that they can find peace.
Yeah. Wow. That's beautiful. Thanks for sharing that.
Thank you so much. Liz, anything else you want to say before we wrap up?
I think and I want to share the experience I've had of just being able to talk with other moms and with other people as we've been more open about this, and how amazing that's been, and how amazing it's been to show my son, like, oh, look at this amazing family that they love their son, and here's, his life, and to show him that he doesn't need to be ashamed, and that we're going to support and love him through everything. And I've been really grateful for the opportunity to get to know a lot of other moms like me and families like me, just wanting to love and accept their kids and bring them to Christ.
Thank you. It just feels clear that, it's our loss. Like, if we lose Sam as a church, it's our loss. And I just appreciate so much all of the work that you are both doing to help us understand better what we can do to make it a more welcoming place, and also to just get over our own wounds and fears so that we can recognize and appreciate the gifts that this entire community can bring to the church. So thank you so much for your work. And we're just, feel a lot of gratitude for you both, and to Sam for letting you, and Jordon for letting you share their story. Thanks, guys.
Thank you both so much. Okay, thanks so much for listening, and we really hope that you enjoyed that conversation with Liz and Jordon Sharp, and a huge thanks to both of them for coming on. And as always, if Faith Matters content is resonating with you and you get a chance, we'd love for you to leave a rating or review on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or whatever platform you listen on. It really helps get the word out about Faith Matters, and we really appreciate your support. Thanks again for listening, and as always, you can check out more at faithmatters.org.